Ta-da! And welcome to Josef's Model Railway and Toy Room. Thank you so much, as always, for joining me. Just a little bit of housekeeping. You don't need to worry about liking, following, or subscribing to any of my videos. I just put them out there where I can, have the holly jolly greatest time in doing so. Now, you really took some satisfaction in seeing a motorized dapole semaphore signal in the previous video, and that we wired up after so much frustration. We've got the magic device to make it work, and it is mostly for theatrics. Yes, I wanted it working, but that kind of brings us into what we're doing at the moment, since you know that we've been busy installing signal gantries with the traditional red and green, so the more Westinghouse electrified style signals that we see across many railroads. So what I wanted to do down near the signal box there where I put that signal in is I wanted to create a little bit of a scene where we're sort of seeing the new and the old. Remember, I'm still going to be running some steam trains, and mostly, as you see in the modern era now, they're sort of running on heritage lines, or they bring them out for a special occasion and things like that. And that's the justification to how I'm running them. I'm not trying to create an era of the yesteryear back in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, what have you. It's just I bring them out every now and then, and there's a justification to see them running on the layout because it's obviously a special occasion. So just to set the scene for you, basically what we want to do is demonstrate that this is the last few days of that particular signal as our rail network crew are preparing to decommission it, and further up the line they're replacing and have just laid a new concrete slab for installing a brand new type of signal, of which we're not too sure what it is because that's not what you will see, but you'll see all the preparation. Of course, I'm making mention of the cable reels sitting on the little Jinker trailers where they usually start doing the cable runs going through into the cable trunking and or ducting and or other conduit that happens where they're feeding cables in and pull-throughs and an excavator digging a hole and just creating something here. That's pretty much what we're going to be looking at today, just creating a little bit of detailed interest. Now, the scene isn't 100% complete, as I made mention of in the previous video. This is going to be a 3-part series, in which part we've covered wiring in part 1, we've covered part 2, which we're going to do now with creating the scene, and part 3, which we'll see later in the years, where I finally created the rest of the scenery and the backdrop that's going to be happening there, because I'm still noodling with an idea to try and squeeze a lot more into it. Space, as always mentioned, is quite limited on this layout, and the reason for that, if you haven't all figured it out yet, is the majority of the room on the green carpet here is to leave room for playing things like Lego and things like that as we do things in the future. So we sort of get the best of both worlds. But we've got this scene. I've been very busy attempting to paint and customize and do my own little things to make the scene a little more interesting. It doesn't need to be a long one today because all of the techniques that I've used have been discussed in previous videos. So if there's something that you're curious on how I did this with the ground or things like that, you can just go back, or ballast and things like that. Check them out in previous videos. As usual, a little bit of time lapse showing some of the progress on how we develop the scene up. And of course, the final shots, which of course are just wonderful. We'll also introduce you to a few key characters. And while there's still plenty more that needs to happen, it's a lovely, refreshing break to get us back to seeing something a little bit different on the model railway. We've been doing a lot of technical sort of stuff. There'll be a lot more technical stuff coming up and wiring and things, but there's a lot more surprises regarding landscaping. And as we count down toward another Christmas, rest assured we've still got some fantastic ones coming up. So if you're looking at a whole bunch of dressed pine and plywood in the back, don't worry, that's not going to be permanent. That's basically just where we're up to at the moment. So let's have a look today at what we've been up to in creating this wonderful little scene.
2024 in Australia, and a big thanks to, and look, I'm so sorry, I cannot find a video again. I think it's Graham White from memory. Barnes Junction. Look, I really can't tell you, but the point is, here we are seeing basically a modernized line with the modern signals beside it. That being said, though, we still have the traditional semaphore signals. So this is a great example that it is still as current today as it could have been 20 years ago. And I think it's just a tremendous piece of footage and kind of really fits that kind of era and area that I'm trying to model, as you can see in my feature crossing. Albeit we do see a little extra lush green because I really have a thing for green, but I like to try and tie the layout in with these little moments. Just quickly, this is the canal piling that we used for the canal scene, obviously. I like to take these bits off, and you've seen me do this at Noodle Knocker Junction, put them into some sort of a container. It doesn't really matter. It's all completely dry, even though it looks like a mess. We're just going to take a few of these, and what you want to do is just liberally apply a little bit of this Vallejo umber wash. So you know I'm always talking about the other washes. Well, this one just really gives it that nice earthy texture. You don't do anything to this except just put a few drops in, and I usually add a little bit of water to this and then just whizzle them around, and that's pretty much all there is to it. There's also an ink as well you can use that's quite good if you've got large bits. You can sort of leave it soaking overnight. It's just I find it works well but takes a while to soak in. This gives you some pretty instant results, and I'm not really worried about if the texture's not dark enough, because that's where I'll come back in with the natural umber and brush it over, which will give it both texture and I can get it down to the color I need as required. All right, so that's about it for that. We'll let them soak in the rest of the color, and that's all we've got to do with those.
Lights, camera, action. So come with me now. We'll turn the camera around. I'm going to take you for a little walk into the scene, introduce you to some of these key characters that we've now got on the layout, and have a look exactly what's going on. Well, let's get started, shall we? Now, I just want to talk to you for a second because this is a lovely steady shot that shows me exactly what we need to see here. However, and even when we just do a quick zoom here, it's wonderful, except that I think you'll have to forgive the wobbliness. I'm going to take it off the tripod and I'm actually going to walk you through the entire scene of what's going on. Don't worry, some beautiful still shots in just a moment. Let us get started now, shall we? Now look at this truck. How could I say no to this? And I know it's a bit of an American style truck, but the indicators and just the detail and modeling that went into that with getting it illuminated is something I would never be able to do, even if I tried. So I'm very happy with this. And while it's an American style truck, in Australia, culture has seen us shift to mostly American style trucks. So I think that's got to be a pass. Let's move on down now to the first part of the scene. Some telecommunications technicians getting ready for something going on here. This strapping young lad here, we'll call him John, shall we? And here he is pulling his cable off this particular Jinker, and perhaps that's his site supervisor. You know what? That chap looks like he could be a Brett Cooper. Let's call him Brett for the minute. Anyway, they're obviously working through something. There's some conduit in the ground and some cones on that little pedestrian path that I made up there. And of course, we've got some other chaps down here just digging up and working around whatever's going on here. The footpath, of course, I think the detail came out quite well in that. It's not perfect, but again, the rest of the scene will make sense once we've completed it up. I'm hoping, space permitting, I originally was hoping for a little slipway that could come back and lead off, and don't think so much, while the scenery will look a bit like our forestry section, it'll be more grass and less trees, to which we may have the Hornby Cotswold fencing wall, stone wall, something like that. So that's why the scene doesn't quite look quite there yet, but we are getting there. Some security cameras to keep an eye that no one's up to anything dangerous. And of course, we come around the corner and we can see our first cabinet that is now servicing our signal gantry. And I think that really just looks right. And I had a spare bit of
cable there, so we've coiled it up. We finally see our communications mast finally in place, and we'll come back and talk a bit more about that later on. Over to the signal box, and there is the scale model scenery planks that we had done up. And I think that turned out quite well. A little lick of paint there and a little bit of detail. Again, all the mechanical rods and things that would have been here are no longer. And of course, that may still feature in another story, because remember, the old disused section is our old line. And I think there's still a story to be told in that. I'm not too sure. We'll come back to that. Of course, the signal box, as we've talked about in the earlier video, but let's just pay a quick howdy-doody to our signalman operator that is in there. And of course, that is Carl. You'll notice his skin is slightly darker. I'm not getting into a race thing, but this is how I know Carl.
Like I don't have enough to remember already. Is that right?
Classic stuff. And let's not get confused for the Simpsons purists out there. In the first series, where we're also introduced to this particular Carl with the classy voice.
Obedient servant, Carl. Good luck, sir.
So I really think we've got something coming along nicely. And the Carl I'm referencing, why is he called Carl? Because every time I get an order from Scale Model Scenery, generally it will have a sticker on it saying who the item was packed by. And most, 9 out of 10 times, all of my items have been packed by Carl. So, ladies and gentlemen, Carl from Scale Model Scenery is my signal box operator and or character from The Simpsons. Now, let's make our way through to where we've come through here. Of course, just recycling bits of plastic that seemed appropriate here. We'll come back and do the rest as we go. Painted and made my own Jinkers here. I actually did 2 of them, but this one deserved to be in the right spot. And I really think this came out well with just 3 key bits of paint. I swear there was a video for it, but I can't find it now. Painted up the cones, the cable reel. It turned out okay. Also try to do the back tail lights as well. Not perfect, but on the right angle. And from where I'm standing, you'll never know the difference. Again, inside our trunking down the side, if you're wondering, that almost looks like it could be real cable. Yes, that is hobby craft wire that I've just bent into place there. And an older style cabinet, because this cabinet's probably been here when they decided to illuminate our particular semaphore signal. Of course, it'll make its way to a new style, which is part of the story here. And what the hey, let's push the button and see our magnificent signal in action that we've spent 100 hours on. And I must say at this point, it belongs there. Now, what about this excavator? Yes, I still have the beautiful Volvo over at the other side, the beautiful backhoe. But how could I turn down this particular cat with the flashing beacon on the roof? Of course, if we look nice and carefully, we've also got the detail in the overhead rear and front lighting, along with the indicators flashing as well. And that is just the sort of detail that in a million years I just wouldn't be able to get down to. So I couldn't be more happier than seeing this. Basic weathering, as we've described in another video, same process went on to this particular one. And as we come in, you can see they've got the old style point motor down here that was popularized in Europe, I believe. But rest assured, over in the corner here is a Westinghouse ready to come in and take over the brunt of it. If you look even more carefully, you'll notice that the rope coming out of the conduit there is the blue and yellow Parramatta or eels or Telstra pull-through rope as we know it in Australia.
And here is some of that rope I have in my backyard. And no, I didn't forget to do my homework. I just forgot to put it earlier in the video, but they're actually clearing a section of land not far from me where this exact scene is basically being created, where they're having to move telecommunications lines for an expansion on the road. I also spotted this on a call out to a customer where there was a Jinker loaded up with fibre optic on it. And further up the road, they're actually putting in some new lights, which demonstrates that concrete slab with the conduit coming through it.
And obviously a newer style cabinet. Also just did my own bunting there as well with the orange. That was just a piece of that leftover fishing net from our coastal scene, dabbed in paint. And of course, we've just used the evergreen rods that I just painted in brown and dipped the tips into yellow to give it that safety appearance that we see on those star pickets. An extra cable reel we've knocked up, extra bits of trunking that they're obviously using, some chaps having a quick break, another one making sure there's diggers in the right place, spare bits of cable. But let me humor you for a moment because it gets a bit more interesting. And I apologize for the sloppy camera work, but here we are. We come across the bridge. Now, you'll notice we've picked up a couple of cables here. Now, they've temporarily taken some cord and wired up to the point motor that's being worked on at the moment. This is another one of the aging ones. And And here we have someone that is down here actually feeding the cable straight in there to create some sort of a bypass. Well, that's as I understand it. He's got another cabinet ready there, a jinker there, but with no vehicle, just got a cone so no one walks into that tow bar, which can be a bit of a howdy doody for anyone that's hit their shin on that before. Here's our new point motor, bits of conduit. And if we look carefully, here's the little scene I created with concrete and trying to create some bolts. Conduit coming up. Some more rope with the blue and yellow coiled up there. We've even got a spanner on the ground as well when it comes to detail. And they've obviously just clumped different feeds of cord because this is obviously going to run up to what would be a brand new signal feeding the line as needed as we replace our old style semaphore one. So that's the detail we've gone to there. A few drops of oil here and there and just trying to create something. We've still got a bit more to do with greenery and all the rest of it. But now you know what the story is going on here and what we've tried to create. I can't wait to keep carrying on with this scene. And with a family member who works as a linesman in the telecommunications field, I really think they'll take great satisfaction in seeing something really interesting going on, which is what it's all about. So as you can see, we still have plenty more happening that still needs to happen, and we're going to develop this whole rail yard a bit further. But for the meantime, I'm really happy with how it's starting to progress. Again, regarding our locomotive shed here, I'm actually going to start again. I'm not happy with what we were doing with the base of it. I don't know if you can have a quick peep in there, but we're going to start ripping all that up again and starting again. As you can see from the back, I want to do something else with a new product that's come out. So we'll talk about that shortly. Sorry, there are no trains running. There is far too much on the tracks at the moment, but don't worry, that means some big videos coming up soon and plenty more time for trains in the future. Just quickly, let's put the lights on underneath the board, and you can see the wiring is nice and simple. Entry point for the truck, we've just daisy chained our 2 street posts on that pedestrian path and sent them down to an empty channel into one of our lighting hubs. There's always seems to be spare provision I've always made for that. And of course, coming to the other side of the board, we can just see the penetration for our backhoe here, of course, straight into one of these splicer plugs and straight into our accessories bus, which is actually this one here. I always keep the end ones. I always start from the middle and then work my way out. In case there's a last minute addition here and there, there's always room. It gets harder to move in the middle when that starts getting full. Well, girls and boys, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We've reached the end. So as always, please do stay safe. And until the next one, toodles!